Dear listener, today we start a book named White Night by Fyodor Dostoevsky, so please like, share and subscribe my channel for our next audio book and other part of this book. Thanks. First night. It was a wonderful night, such a night as is only possible when we are young, dear reader. The sky was so starry, so bright that, looking at it, one could not help asking oneself whether ill-humored and capricious people could live under such a sky. That is a youthful question too, dear reader, very youthful, but may the Lord put it more frequently into your heart. Speaking of capricious and ill-humored people, I cannot help recalling my moral condition all that day. From early morning I had been oppressed by a strange despondency. It suddenly seemed to me that I was lonely, that everyone was forsaking me and going away from me. Of course, anyone is entitled to ask who everyone was. For though I had been living almost 8 years in Petersburg, I had hardly an acquaintance. But what did I want with acquaintances? I was acquainted with all Petersburg as it was. That was why I felt as though they were all deserting me when all Petersburg packed up and went to its summer villa. I felt afraid of being left alone, and for 3 whole days I wandered about the town in profound dejection, not knowing what to do with myself. Whether I walked in the Nevsky, went to the gardens or sauntered on the embankment, there was not one face of those I had been accustomed to meet at the same time and place all the year. They, of course, do not know me, but I know them. I know them intimately. I have almost made a study of their faces, and am delighted when they are gay, and downcast when they are under a cloud. I have almost struck up a friendship with one old man whom I meet every blessed day, at the same hour in Fontanka. Such a grave, pensive countenance, he is always whispering to himself and brandishing his left arm, while in his right hand he holds a long gnarled stick with a gold knob. He even notices me and takes a warm interest in me. If I happen not to be at a certain time in the same spot in Fontanka, I am certain he feels disappointed. That is how it is that we almost bow to each other, especially when we are both in good humor. The other day, when we had not seen each other for 2 days and met on the third, we were actually touching our hats, but, realizing in time, dropped our hands and passed each other with a look of interest. I know the houses too. As I walk along they seem to run forward in the streets to look out at me from every window, and almost to say, "Good morning. How do you do? I am quite well, thank God, and I am to have a new story in May," or, "How are you? I am being redecorated tomorrow," or, "I was almost burnt down and had such a fright," and so on. I have my favorites among them. Some are dear friends. One of them intends to be treated by the architect this summer. I shall go every day on purpose to see that the operation is not a failure. God forbid. But I shall never forget an incident with a very pretty little house of a light pink color. It was such a charming little brick house, it looked so hospitably at me, and so proudly at its ungainly neighbors, that my heart rejoiced whenever I happened to pass it. Suddenly last week I walked along the street, and when I looked at my friend I heard a plaintive, "They are painting me yellow. The villains. The barbarians. They had spared nothing, neither columns nor cornices, and my poor little friend was as yellow as a canary. It almost made me bilious. And to this day I have not had the courage to visit my poor disfigured friend, painted the color of the celestial empire." So now you understand, reader, in what sense I am acquainted with all Petersburg. I have mentioned already that I had felt worried for 3 whole days before I guessed the cause of my uneasiness. And I felt ill at ease in the street. This one had gone and that one had gone, and what had become of the other, and at home I did not feel like myself either. For 2 evenings I was puzzling my brains to think what was amiss in my corner, why I felt so uncomfortable in it. And in perplexity I scanned my grimy green walls, my ceiling covered with a spider's web, the growth of which Matrona has so successfully encouraged. I looked over all my furniture, examined every chair, wondering whether the trouble lay there, for if one chair is not standing in the same position as it stood the day before, I am not myself. I looked at the window, but it was all in vain. I was not a bit the better for it. I even bethought me to send for Matrona, and was giving her some fatherly admonitions in regard to the spider's web and sluttishness in general, but she simply stared at me in amazement and went away without saying a word, so that the spider's web is comfortably hanging in its place to this day. I only at last this morning realized what was wrong. Aie. Why, they are giving me the slip and making off to their summer villas. Forgive the triviality of the expression, but I am in no mood for fine language. For everything that had been in Petersburg had gone or was going away for the holidays, for every respectable gentleman of dignified appearance who took a cab was at once transformed, in my eyes, into a respectable head of a household who, after his daily duties were over, was making his way to the bosom of his family, to the summer villa, for all the passers-by had now quite a peculiar air which seemed to say to every one they met, "We are only here for the moment, gentlemen, and in another 2 hours we shall be going off to the summer villa." If a window opened after delicate fingers, white as snow, had tapped upon the pane, and the head of a pretty girl was thrust out, calling to a street seller with pots of flowers at once on the spot, I fancied that those flowers were being bought not simply in order to enjoy the flowers and the spring in stuffy town lodgings, but because they would all be very soon moving into the country and could take the flowers with them. What is more, I made such progress in my new peculiar sort of investigation that I could distinguish correctly from the mere air of each in what summer villa he was living. The inhabitants of Kameny and Aptekarsky Islands or of the Peterhof Road were marked by the studied elegance of their manner, their fashionable summer suits, and the fine carriages in which they drove to town. Visitors to Pargalovo and places further away impressed one at first sight by their reasonable and dignified air. The tripper to Krestovsky Island could be recognized by his look of irrepressible gaiety. If I chanced to meet a long procession of wagoners walking lazily with the reins in their hands beside wagons loaded with regular mountains of furniture, tables, chairs, ottomans, and sofas and domestic utensils of all sorts, frequently with a decrepit cook sitting on the top of it all, guarding her master's property as though it were the apple of her eye, or if I saw boats heavily loaded with household goods crawling along the Neva or Fontanka to the Black River or the islands, the wagons and the boats were multiplied tenfold, 100-fold, in my eyes. I fancied that everything was astir and moving, everything was going in regular caravans to the summer villas. It seemed as though Petersburg threatened to become a wilderness, so that at last I felt ashamed, mortified and sad that I had nowhere to go for the holidays and no reason to go away. I was ready to go away with every wagon, to drive off with every gentleman of respectable appearance who took a cab, but no one, absolutely no one, invited me. It seemed they had forgotten me, as though really I were a stranger to them. I took long walks, succeeding, as I usually did, in quite forgetting where I was, when I suddenly found myself at the city gates. Instantly I felt light-hearted, and I passed the barrier and walked between cultivated fields and meadows, unconscious of fatigue, and feeling only all over as though a burden were falling off my soul. All the passers-by gave me such friendly looks that they seemed almost greeting me, they all seemed so pleased at something. They were all smoking cigars, every one of them. And I felt pleased as I never had before. It was as though I had suddenly found myself in Italy, so strong was the effect of nature upon a half-sick townsman like me, almost stifling between city walls. There is something inexpressibly touching in nature round Petersburg, when at the approach of spring she puts forth all her might, all the powers bestowed on her by heaven, when she breaks into leaf, decks herself out and spangles herself with flowers. Somehow I cannot help being reminded of a frail, consumptive girl, at whom one sometimes looks with compassion, sometimes with sympathetic love, whom sometimes one simply does not notice, though suddenly in one instant she becomes, as though by chance, inexplicably lovely and exquisite, and, impressed and intoxicated, one cannot help asking oneself what power made those sad, pensive eyes flash with such fire, what summoned the blood to those pale, wan cheeks, what bathed with passion those soft features, what set that bosom heaving, what so suddenly called strength, life, and beauty into the poor girl's face, making it gleam with such a smile, kindle with such bright, sparkling laughter. You look round, you seek for someone, you conjecture. But the moment passes, and next day you meet, maybe, the same pensive and preoccupied look as before, the same pale face, the same meek and timid movements, and even signs of remorse, traces of immortal anguish and regret for the fleeting distraction. And you grieve that the momentary beauty has faded so soon, never to return, that it flashed upon you so treacherously, so vainly, grieve because you had not even time to love her. And yet my night was better than my day. This was how it happened. I came back to the town very late, and it had struck 10 as I was going towards my lodgings. My way lay along the canal embankment, where at that hour you never meet a soul. It is true that I live in a very remote part of the town. I walked along singing, for when I am happy I am always humming to myself, like every happy man who has no friend or acquaintance with whom to share his joy. Suddenly I had a most unexpected adventure. Leaning on the canal railing stood a woman with her elbows on the rail. She was apparently looking with great attention at the muddy water of the canal. She was wearing a very charming yellow hat and a jaunty little black mantle. She's a girl, and I am sure she is dark, I thought. She did not seem to hear my footsteps, and did not even stir when I passed by with bated breath and loudly throbbing heart. Strange, I thought, she must be deeply absorbed in something, and all at once I stopped as though petrified. I heard a muffled sob. Yes. I was not mistaken, the girl was crying, and a minute later I heard sob after sob. Good heavens! My heart sank. And timid as I was with women, yet this was such a moment. I turned, took a step towards her, and should certainly have pronounced the word madam, if I had not known that that exclamation has been uttered 1,000 times in every Russian society novel. It was only that reflection stopped me, but while I was seeking for a word, the girl came to herself, looked round, started, cast down her eyes and slipped by me along the embankment. I at once followed her, but she, divining this, left the embankment, crossed the road and walked along the pavement. I dared not cross the street after her. My heart was fluttering like a captured bird. All at once a chance came to my aid. Along the same side of the pavement there suddenly came into sight, not far from the girl, a gentleman in evening dress, of dignified years, though by no means of dignified carriage. He was staggering and cautiously leaning against the wall. The girl flew straight as an arrow, with the timid haste one sees in all girls who do not want anyone to volunteer to accompany them home at night, and no doubt the staggering gentleman would not have pursued her, if my good luck had not prompted him. Suddenly, without a word to anyone, the gentleman set off and flew full speed in pursuit of my unknown lady. She was racing like the wind, but the staggering gentleman was overtook her. The girl uttered a shriek, and I bless my luck for the excellent knotted stick, which happened on that occasion to be in my right hand. In a flash I was on the other side of the street, in a flash the obtrusive gentleman had taken in the position, had grasped the irresistible argument, fallen back without a word, and only when we were very far away protested against my action in rather vigorous language. But his words hardly reached us. "Give me your arm," I said to the girl. "And he won't dare to annoy us further." She took my arm without a word, still trembling with excitement and terror. Oh, obtrusive gentleman! How I blessed you at that moment! I stole a glance at her. She was very charming and dark. I had guessed right. On her black eyelashes there still glistened a tear from her recent terror or her former grief, I don't know. But there was already a gleam of a smile on her lips. She too stole a glance at me, faintly blushed and looked down. "There, you see, why did you drive me away? If I had been here, nothing would have happened." "But I did not know you, I thought that you too." "Why, do you know me now?" "A little." "Here, for instance, why are you trembling?" "Oh, you are right at the first guess," I answered, delighted that my girl had intelligence, that is never out of place in company with beauty. "Yes, from the first glance you have guessed the sort of man you have to do with." "Precisely, I am shy with women, I am agitated, I don't deny it, as much so as you were a minute ago when that gentleman alarmed you. I am in some alarm now. It's like a dream, and I never guessed even in my sleep that I should ever talk with any woman." "What, really?" "Yes, if my arm trembles, it is because it has never been held by a pretty little hand like yours. I am a complete stranger to women, that is, I have never been used to them. You see, I am alone, I don't even know how to talk to them. Here, I don't know now whether I have not said something silly to you. Tell me frankly, I assure you beforehand that I am not quick to take offense." "No, nothing, nothing, quite the contrary. And if you insist on my speaking frankly, I will tell you that women like such timidity, and if you want to know more, I like it too, and I won't drive you away till I get home." "You will make me," I said, breathless with delight, "lose my timidity, and then farewell to all my chances." "Chances? What chances of what? That's not so nice." "I beg your pardon, I am sorry, it was a slip of the tongue, but how can you expect one at such a moment to have no desire to be liked, eh?" "Well, yes, but do, for goodness sake, be kind. Think what I am. Here, I am 26 and I have never seen anyone. How can I speak well, tactfully, and to the point? It will seem better to you when I have told you everything openly. I don't know how to be silent when my heart is speaking. Well, never mind. Believe me, not one woman, never, never. No acquaintance of any sort. And I do nothing but dream every day that at last I shall meet someone. Oh, if only you knew how often I have been in love in that way." "How, with whom?" "Why, with no one, with an ideal, with the one I dream of in my sleep. I make up regular romances in my dreams." "Ah, you don't know me." "It's true, of course, I have met 2 or 3 women, but what sort of women were they? They were all landladies, that. But I shall make you laugh if I tell you that I have several times thought of speaking, just simply speaking, to some aristocratic lady in the street, when she is alone, I need hardly say, speaking to her, of course, timidly, respectfully, passionately, telling her that I am perishing in solitude, begging her not to send me away, saying that I have no chance of making the acquaintance of any woman, impressing upon her that it is a positive duty for a woman not to repulse so timid a prayer from such a luckless man as me. That, in fact, all I ask is, that she should say 2 or 3 sisterly words with sympathy, should not repulse me at first sight, should take me on trust and listen to what I say, should laugh at me if she likes, encourage me, Say 2 words to me, only 2 words, even though we never meet again afterwards. But you are laughing, however, that is why I am telling you. Don't be vexed, I am only laughing at your being your own enemy, and if you had tried you would have succeeded, perhaps, even though it had been in the street, the simpler the better. No kind-hearted woman, unless she were stupid or, still more, vexed about something at the moment, could bring herself to send you away without those 2 words which you ask for so timidly. But what am I saying? Of course she would take you for a madman. I was judging by myself, I know a good deal about other people's lives. Oh, thank you, I cried, you don't know what you have done for me now. I am glad. I am glad. But tell me, how did you find out that I was the sort of woman with whom? Well, whom you think worthy of attention and friendship, in fact, not a landlady as you say. What made you decide to come up to me? What made me? But you were alone, that gentleman was too insolent, it's night. You must admit that it was a duty. No, no, I mean before, on the other side, you know you meant to come up to me. On the other side, really I don't know how to answer, I am afraid to. Do you know I have been happy today? I walked along singing, I went out into the country, I have never had such happy moments. You perhaps it was my fancy. Forgive me for referring to it, I fancied you were crying, and I could not bear to hear it. It made my heart ache. Oh, my goodness. Surely I might be troubled about you. Surely there was no harm in feeling brotherly compassion for you. I beg your pardon, I said. Compassion? Well, in short, surely you would not be offended at my involuntary impulse to go up to you. Stop, that's enough, don't talk of it, said the girl, looking down, and pressing my hand. It's my fault for having spoken of it, but I am glad I was not mistaken in you. But here I am home, I must go down this turning, it's 2 steps from here. Goodbye, thank you. Surely you don't mean that we shall never see each other again? Surely this is not to be the end? You see, said the girl, laughing, at first you only wanted 2 words, and now. However, I won't say anything. Perhaps we shall meet. I shall come here tomorrow, I said. Oh, forgive me, I am already making demands. Yes, you are not very patient, you are almost insisting. Listen, listen. I interrupted her. Forgive me if I tell you something else. I tell you what, I can't help coming here tomorrow. I am a dreamer, I have so little real life that I look upon such moments as this now, as so rare, that I cannot help going over such moments again in my dreams. I shall be dreaming of you all night, a whole week, a whole year. I shall certainly come here tomorrow, just here to this place, just at the same hour, and I shall be happy remembering today. This place is dear to me already. I have already 2 or 3 such places in Petersburg. I once shed tears over memories. Like you, who knows, perhaps you were weeping 10 minutes ago over some memory, but, forgive me, I have forgotten myself again. Perhaps you have once been particularly happy here. Very good, said the girl, perhaps I will come here tomorrow, too, at 10 o'clock. I see that I can't forbid you. The fact is, I have to be here. Don't imagine that I am making an appointment with you, I tell you beforehand that I have to be here on my own account. But, well, I tell you straight out, I don't mind if you do come. To begin with, something unpleasant might happen as it did today, but never mind that. In short, I should simply like to see you. To say 2 words to you. Only, mind, you must not think the worse of me now. Don't think I make appointments so lightly. I shouldn't make it except that. But let that be my secret. Only a compact beforehand. A compact? Speak, tell me all beforehand. I agree to anything, I am ready for anything, I cried delighted. I answer for myself, I will be obedient, respectful. You know me. It's just because I do know you that I ask you to come tomorrow, said the girl, laughing. I know you perfectly. But mind you will come on the condition, in the first place only be good, do what I ask you. See, I speak frankly, you won't fall in love with me, that's impossible, I assure you. I am ready for friendship, here's my hand, but you mustn't fall in love with me, I beg you. I swear, I cried, gripping her hand. Hush, don't swear, I know you are ready to flare up like gunpowder. Don't think ill of me for saying so. If only you knew. I, too, have no one to whom I can say a word, whose advice I can ask. Of course, one does not look for an adviser in the street, but you are an exception. I know you as though we had been friends for 20 years. You won't deceive me, will you? You will see. The only thing is, I don't know how I am going to survive the next 24 hours. Sleep soundly. Good night, and remember that I have trusted you already. But you exclaimed so nicely just now, surely one can't be held responsible for every feeling, even for brotherly sympathy. Do you know, that was so nicely said, that the idea struck me at once, that I might confide in you. For God's sake do, but about what is it? Wait till tomorrow. Meanwhile, let that be a secret. So much the better for you, it will give it a faint flavor of romance. Perhaps I will tell you tomorrow, and perhaps not. I will talk to you a little more beforehand, we will get to know each other better. Oh yes, I will tell you all about myself tomorrow. But what has happened? It is as though a miracle had befallen me. My God, where am I? Come, tell me, aren't you glad that you were not angry and did not drive me away at the first moment, as any other woman would have done? In 2 minutes you have made me happy forever. Yes, happy, who knows, perhaps, you have reconciled me with myself, solved my doubts. Perhaps such moments come upon me. But there, I will tell you all about it tomorrow. You shall know everything, everything. Very well, I consent, you shall begin. Agreed. Goodbye till tomorrow. Till tomorrow. And we parted. I walked about all night, I could not make up my mind to go home. I was so happy tomorrow. Second night. Well, so you have survived, she said, pressing both my hands. I've been here for the last 2 hours, you don't know what a state I have been in all day. I know. But to business. Do you know why I have come? Not to talk nonsense, as I did yesterday. I tell you what, we must behave more sensibly in future. I thought a great deal about it last night. In what way, in what must we be more sensible? I am ready for my part, but, really, nothing more sensible has happened to me in my life than this, now. Really, in the first place, I beg you not to squeeze my hands so. Secondly, I must tell you that I spent a long time thinking about you and feeling doubtful today. And how did it end? How did it end? The upshot of it is that we must begin all over again, because the conclusion I reached today was that I don't know you at all, that I behaved like a baby last night, like a little girl, and, of course, the fact of it is, that it's my soft heart that is to blame. That is, I sang my own praises, as one always does in the end when one analyses one's conduct. And therefore, to correct my mistake, I've made up my mind to find out all about you minutely. but as I have no one from whom I can find out anything, you must tell me everything fully yourself. Well, what sort of man are you? Come, make haste, begin, tell me your whole history. My history? I cried in alarm. My history? But who has told you I have a history? I have no history. Then how have you lived, if you have no history? She interrupted, laughing. Absolutely without any history. I have lived, as they say, keeping myself to myself, that is, utterly alone, entirely alone. Do you know what it means to be alone? But how alone do you mean? You never saw anyone? Oh no, I see people, of course, but still I am alone. Why, do you never talk to anyone? Strictly speaking, with no one. Who are you then? Explain yourself. Stay, I guess, most likely, like me, you have a grandmother. She is blind and will never let me go anywhere, so that I have almost forgotten how to talk, and when I played some pranks 2 years ago, and she saw there was no holding me in, she called me up and pinned my dress to hers, and ever since we sit like that for days together. She knits a stocking, though she's blind, and I sit beside her, so or read aloud to her. It's such a queer habit. Here for 2 years I've been pinned to her. Good heavens! What misery! But no, I haven't a grandmother like that. Well, if you haven't, why do you sit at home? Listen, do you want to know the sort of man I am? Yes, yes. In the strict sense of the word. In the very strictest sense of the word. Very well, I am a type. Type, type. What sort of type? Cried the girl, laughing, as though she had not had a chance of laughing for a whole year. Yes, it's very amusing talking to you. Look, here's a seat, let us sit down. No one is passing here, no one will hear us, and begin your history. For it's no good your telling me, I know you have a history, only you are concealing it. To begin with, what is a type? A type is an original, it's an absurd person. I said, infected by her childish laughter. It's a character. Listen, do you know what is meant by a dreamer? A dreamer? Indeed, I should think I do know. I am a dreamer myself. Sometimes, as I sit by grandmother, all sorts of things come into my head. Why, when one begins dreaming, one lets one's fancy run away with one. Why, I marry a Chinese prince. Though sometimes it is a good thing to dream. But, goodness knows. Especially when one has something to think of apart from dreams, added the girl, this time rather seriously. Excellent. If you have been married to a Chinese emperor, you will quite understand me. Come, listen. But 1 minute, I don't know your name. Yet. At last. You have been in no hurry to think of it? Oh, my goodness. It never entered my head, I felt quite happy as it was. My name is Nastenka. Nastenka. And nothing else. Nothing else. Why, is not that enough for you, you insatiable person? Not enough, on the contrary, it's a great deal, a very great deal, Nastenka, you kind girl, if you are Nastenka for me from the first. Quite so. Well. Well, listen, Nastenka, now for this absurd history. I sat down beside her, assumed a pedantically serious attitude, and began as though reading from a manuscript. There are, Nastenka, though you may not know it, strange nooks in Petersburg. It seems as though the same sun as shines for all Petersburg people does not peep into those spots, but some other different new one, bespoken expressly for those nooks, and it throws a different light on everything. In these corners, dear Nastenka, quite a different life is lived, quite unlike the life that is surging round us, but such as perhaps exists in some unknown realm, not among us in our serious, over-serious, time. Well, that life is a mixture of something purely fantastic, fervently ideal, with something alas, Nastenka dingily prosaic and ordinary, not to say incredibly vulgar. Phew! Good heavens! What a preface! What do I hear? Listen, Nastenka. It seems to me I shall never be tired of calling you Nastenka. Let me tell you that in these corners live strange people, dreamers. The dreamer, if you want an exact definition, is not a human being, but a creature of an intermediate sort. For the most part he settles in some inaccessible corner, as though hiding from the light of day. Once he slips into his corner, he grows to it like a snail, or, anyway, he is in that respect very much like that remarkable creature, which is an animal and a house both at once, and is called a tortoise. Why do you suppose he is so fond of his four walls, which are invariably painted green, grimy, dismal, and reeking unpardonably of tobacco smoke? Why is it that when this absurd gentleman is visited by one of his few acquaintances and he ends by getting rid of all his friends, why does this absurd person meet him with such embarrassment, changing countenance and overcome with confusion, as though he had only just committed some crime within his four walls, as though he had been forging counterfeit notes, or as though he were writing verses to be sent to a journal with an anonymous letter, in which he states that the real poet is dead, and that his friend thinks it his sacred duty to publish his things? Why, tell me, Nastenka, why is it conversation is not easy between the two friends? Why is there no laughter? Why does no lively word fly from the tongue of the perplexed newcomer, who at other times may be very fond of laughter, lively words, conversation about the fair sex, and other cheerful subjects? And why does this friend, probably a new friend and on his first visit, for there will hardly be a second, and the friend will never come again, why is the friend himself so confused, so tongue-tied, in spite of his wit if he has any, as he looks at the downcast face of his host, who in his turn becomes utterly helpless and at his wits' end after gigantic but fruitless efforts to smooth things over and enliven the conversation, to show his knowledge of polite society, to talk, too, of the fair sex, and by such humble endeavor, to please the poor man, who like a fish out of water has mistakenly come to visit him? Why does the gentleman, all at once remembering some very necessary business which never existed, suddenly seize his hat and hurriedly make off, snatching away his hand from the warm grip of his host, who was trying his utmost to show his regret and retrieve the lost position? Why does the friend chuckle as he goes out of the door, and swear never to come and see this queer creature again, though the queer creature is really a very good fellow, and at the same time he cannot refuse his imagination the little diversion of comparing the queer fellow's countenance during their conversation with the expression of an unhappy kitten treacherously captured, roughly handled, frightened, and subjected to all sorts of indignities by children, till, utterly crestfallen, it hides away from them under a chair in the dark, and there must needs at its leisure bristle up, spit, and wash its insulted face with both paws, and long afterwards look angrily at life and nature, and even at the bit saved from the master's dinner for it by the sympathetic housekeeper. Listen, interrupted Nastenka, who had listened to me all the time in amazement, opening her eyes and her little mouth. Listen, I don't know in the least why it happened and why you ask me such absurd questions. All I know is, that this adventure must have happened word for word to you. Doubtless, I answered, with the gravest face. Well, since there is no doubt about it, go on, said Nastenka, because I want very much to know how it will end. You want to know, Nastenka, what our hero, that is I, for the hero of the whole business was my humble self, did in his corner? You want to know why I lost my head and was upset for the whole day by the unexpected visit of a friend? You want to know why I was so startled, why I blushed when the door of my room was opened, why I was not able to entertain my visitor, and why I was crushed under the weight of my own hospitality. Why, yes, yes, answered Nastenka, that's the point. Listen. You describe it all splendidly, but couldn't you perhaps describe it a little less splendidly? You talk as though you were reading it out of a book. Nastenka, I answered in a stern and dignified voice, hardly able to keep from laughing, dear Nastenka, I know I describe splendidly, but, excuse me, I don't know how else to do it. At this moment, dear Nastenka, at this moment I am like the spirit of King Solomon when, after lying 1,000 years under 7 seals in his urn, those 7 seals were at last taken off. At this moment, Nastenka, when we have met at last after such a long separation, for I have known you for ages, Nastenka, because I have been looking for someone for ages, and that is a sign that it was you I was looking for, and it was ordained that we should meet now. At this moment 1,000 valves have opened in my head, and I must let myself flow in a river of words, or I shall choke. And so I beg you not to interrupt me, Nastenka, but listen humbly and obediently, or I will be silent. No, no, no. Not at all. Go on. I won't say a word. I will continue. There is, my friend Nastenka, 1 hour in my day which I like extremely. That is the hour when almost all business, work, and duties are over, and everyone is hurrying home to dinner, to lie down, to rest, and on the way all are cogitating on other more cheerful subjects relating to their evenings, their nights, and all the rest of their free time. At that hour our hero, for allow me, Nastenka, to tell my story in the third person, for one feels awfully ashamed to tell it in the first person, and so at that hour our hero, who had his work too, was pacing along after the others. But a strange feeling of pleasure set his pale, rather crumpled-looking face working. He looked not with indifference on the evening glow which was slowly fading on the cold Petersburg sky. When I say he looked, I am lying, he did not look at it, but saw it as it were without realizing, as though tired or preoccupied with some other more interesting subject, so that he could scarcely spare a glance for anything about him. He was pleased because till next day he was released from business irksome to him, and happy as a schoolboy let out from the classroom to his games and mischief. Take a look at him, Nastenka, you will see at once that joyful emotion has already had an effect on his weak nerves and morbidly excited fancy. You see he is thinking of something. Of dinner. Do you imagine of the evening? What is he looking at like that? Is it at that gentleman of dignified appearance who is bowing so picturesquely to the lady who rolls by in a carriage drawn by prancing horses? No, Nastenka, what are all those trivialities to him now? He is rich now with his own individual life, he has suddenly become rich, and it is not for nothing that the fading sunset sheds its farewell gleams so gaily before him, and calls forth a swarm of impressions from his warmed heart. Now he hardly notices the road, on which the tiniest details at other times would strike him. Now the goddess of fancy, if you have read Zhukovsky, dear Nastenka, has already with fantastic hands spun her golden warp and begun weaving upon it patterns of marvelous magic life, and who knows, maybe, her fantastic hand has borne him to the 7th crystal heaven, far from the excellent granite pavement on which he was walking his way. Try stopping him now, ask him suddenly where he is standing now, through what streets he is going. He will, probably, remember nothing, neither where he is going nor where he is standing now, and flushing with vexation he will certainly tell some lie to save appearances. That is why he starts, almost cries out, and looks round with horror when a respectable old lady stops him politely in the middle of the pavement and asks her way. Frowning with vexation he strides on, scarcely noticing that more than one passer-by smiles and turns round to look after him, and that a little girl, moving out of his way in alarm, laughs aloud, gazing open-eyed at his broad meditative smile and gesticulations. But fancy catches up in its playful flight the old woman, the curious passers-by, and the laughing child, and the peasants spending their nights in their barges on Fontanka. Our hero, let us suppose, is walking along the canal side at that moment, and capriciously weaves everyone and everything into the canvas like a fly in a spider's web. And it is only after the queer fellow has returned to his comfortable den with fresh stores for his mind to work on, has sat down and finished his dinner, that he comes to himself, when Matrona, who waits upon him always thoughtful and depressed, clears the table and gives him his pipe. He comes to himself then and recalls with surprise that he has dined, though he has absolutely no notion how it has happened. It has grown dark in the room, his soul is sad and empty, the whole kingdom of fancies drops to pieces about him, drops to pieces without a trace, without a sound, floats away like a dream, and he cannot himself remember what he was dreaming. But a vague sensation faintly stirs his heart and sets it aching, some new desire temptingly tickles and excites his fancy, and imperceptibly evokes a swarm of fresh phantoms. Stillness reigns in the little room, imagination is fostered by solitude and idleness, it is faintly smouldering, faintly simmering, like the water with which old Matrona is making her coffee as she moves quietly about in the kitchen close by. Now it breaks out spasmodically, and the book, picked up aimlessly and at random, drops from my dreamer's hand before he has reached the third page. His imagination is again stirred and at work, and again a new world, a new fascinating life opens vistas before him. A fresh dream, fresh happiness. A fresh rush of delicate, voluptuous poison. What is real life to him? To his corrupted eyes we live, you and I, Nastenka, so torpidly, slowly, insipidly. In his eyes we are all so dissatisfied with our fate, so exhausted by our life. And, truly, see how at first sight everything is cold, morose, as though ill-humored among us poor things. Thinks our dreamer. And it is no wonder that he thinks it. Look at these magic phantasms, which so enchantingly, so whimsically, so carelessly and freely group before him in such a magic, animated picture, in which the most prominent figure in the foreground is of course himself, our dreamer, in his precious person. See what varied adventures, what an endless swarm of ecstatic dreams. You ask, perhaps, what he is dreaming of. Why ask that? Why, of everything. Of the lot of the poet, first unrecognized, then crowned with laurels, of friendship with Hoffmann, St. Bartholomew's Night, of Diana Vernon, of playing the hero at the taking of Kazan by Ivan Vasilievich, of Clara Mowbray, of Effie Deans, of the council of the prelates and Huss before them, of the rising of the dead in Robert the Devil. Do you remember the music? It smells of the churchyard. Of Minna and Brenda, of the Battle of Berezina, of the reading of a poem at Countess Vds, of Danton, of Cleopatra e I sui amanti, of a little house in Kolomna, of a little home of one's own, and beside one a dear creature who listens to one on a winter's evening, opening her little mouth and eyes as you are listening to me now, my angel. No, Nastenka, what is there for him, voluptuous slug-guard, in this life, for which you and I have such a longing? He thinks that this is a poor pitiful life, not foreseeing that for him too, maybe, sometime the mournful hour may strike, when for one day of that pitiful life he would give all his years of fantasy, and would give them not only for joy and for happiness, but without caring to make distinctions. In that hour of sadness, remorse and unchecked grief. But so far that threatening has not arrived. He desires nothing, because he is superior to all desire, because he has everything, because he is satiated, because he is the artist of his own life, and creates it for himself every hour to suit his latest whim. And you know this fantastic world of fairyland is so easily, so naturally created. As though it were not a delusion. Indeed, he is ready to believe at some moments that all this life is not suggested by feeling, is not mirage, not a delusion of the imagination, but that it is concrete, real, substantial. Why is it, Nastenka, why is it at such moments one holds one's breath? Why, by what sorcery, through what incomprehensible caprice, is the pulse quickened, does a tear start from the dreamer's eye, while his pale moist cheeks glow, while his whole being is suffused with an inexpressible sense of consolation? Why is it that whole sleepless nights pass like a flash in inexhaustible gladness and happiness, and when the dawn gleams rosy at the window and daybreak floods the gloomy room with uncertain, fantastic light, as in Petersburg, our dreamer, worn out and exhausted, flings himself on his bed and drops asleep with thrills of delight in his morbidly overwrought spirit, and with a weary sweet ache in his heart? Yes, Nastenka, one deceives oneself and unconsciously believes that real true passion is stirring one's soul, one unconsciously believes that there is something living, tangible in one's immaterial dreams. And is it delusion here? Love, for instance, is bound up with all its fathomless joy, all its torturing agonies in his bosom. Only look at him, and you will be convinced. Would you believe, looking at him, dear Nastenka, that he has never known her whom he loves in his ecstatic dreams? Can it be that he has only seen her in seductive visions, and that this passion has been nothing but a dream? Surely they must have spent years hand in hand together alone, the two of them, casting off all the world and each uniting his or her life with the other's. Surely when the hour of parting came she must have lain sobbing and grieving on his bosom, heedless of the tempest raging under the sullen sky, heedless of the wind which snatches and bears away the tears from her black eyelashes. Can all of that have been a dream? And that garden, dejected, forsaken, run wild, with its little moss-grown paths, solitary, gloomy, where they used to walk so happily together, where they hoped, grieved, loved each other so long, and so fondly, and that queer ancestral house where she spent so many years lonely and sad with her morose old husband, always silent and splenetic, who frightened them, while timid as children they hid their love from each other. What torments they suffered, what agonies of terror, how innocent, how pure was their love, and how, I need hardly say, Nastenka, malicious people were. And, good heavens! Surely he met her afterwards, far from their native shores, under alien skies, in the hot south, in the divinely eternal city, in the dazzling splendor of the ball, to the crash of music, in a palazzo, it must be in a palazzo, drowned in a sea of lights, on the balcony, wreathed in myrtle and roses, where, recognizing him, she hurriedly removes her mask and whispering, "I am free," flings herself trembling into his arms, and with a cry of rapture, clinging to one another. In one instant they forget their sorrow and their parting and all their agonies, and the gloomy house and the old man and the dismal garden in that distant land, and the seat on which with a last passionate kiss she tore herself away from his arms, numb with anguish and despair. Oh, Nastenka, you must admit that one would start, betray confusion, and blush like a schoolboy who has just stuffed in his pocket an apple stolen from a neighbor's garden, when your uninvited visitor, some stalwart, lanky fellow, a festive soul fond of a joke, opens your door and shouts out as though nothing were happening, "My dear boy, I have this minute come from Pavlovsk. My goodness! The old count is dead, unutterable happiness is close at hand, and people arrive from Pavlovsk." Finishing my pathetic appeal, I paused pathetically. I remembered that I had an intense desire to force myself to laugh, for I was already feeling that a malignant demon was stirring within me, that there was a lump in my throat, that my chin was beginning to twitch, and that my eyes were growing more and more moist. I expected Nastenka, who listened to me opening her clever eyes, would break into her childish, irrepressible laugh, and I was already regretting that I had gone so far, that I had unnecessarily described what had long been simmering in my heart, about which I could speak as though from a written account of it, because I had long ago passed judgment on myself and now could not resist reading it, making my confession, without expecting to be understood, but to my surprise she was silent, waiting a little, then she faintly pressed my hand and with timid sympathy asked, "Surely you haven't lived like that all your life?" "All my life, Nastenka," I answered, "all my life, and it seems to me I shall go on so to the end." "No, that won't do," she said uneasily, "that must not be, and so, maybe, I shall spend all my life beside grandmother. Do you know, it is not at all good to live like that." "I know, Nastenka, I know," I cried, unable to restrain my feelings longer. "And I realize now, more than ever, that I have lost all my best years. And now I know it and feel it more painfully from recognizing that God has sent me you, my good angel, to tell me that and show it. Now that I sit beside you and talk to you, it is strange for me to think of the future, for in the future there is loneliness again this musty, useless life, and what shall I have to dream of when I have been so happy in reality beside you? Oh, may you be blessed, dear girl, for not having repulsed me at first, for enabling me to say that for 2 evenings, at least, I have lived." "Oh, no, no," cried Nastenka, and tears glistened in her eyes. "No, it mustn't be so any more, we must not part like that." "What are 2 evenings? Oh, Nastenka, Nastenka. Do you know how far you have reconciled me to myself? Do you know now that I shall not think so ill of myself, as I have at some moments? Do you know that, maybe, I shall leave off grieving over the crime and sin of my life, for such a life is a crime and a sin? And do not imagine that I have been exaggerating anything, for goodness sake don't think that, Nastenka, for at times such misery comes over me, such misery. Because it begins to seem to me at such times that I am incapable of beginning a life in real life, because it has seemed to me that I have lost all touch, all instinct for the actual, the real, because at last I have cursed myself, because after my fantastic nights I have moments of returning sobriety, which are awful. Meanwhile, you hear the whirl and roar of the crowd in the vortex of life around you, you hear, you see, men living in reality, you see that life for them is not forbidden, that their life does not float away like a dream, like a vision, that their life is being eternally renewed, eternally youthful, and not 1 hour of it is the same as another, while fancy is so spiritless, monotonous to vulgarity and easily scared, the slave of shadows, of the idea, the slave of the first cloud that shrouds the sun, and overcasts with depression the true Petersburg? Heart so devoted to the sun, and what is fancy in depression? One feels that this inexhaustible fancy is weary at last and worn out with continual exercise, because one is growing into manhood, outgrowing one's old ideals, they are being shattered into fragments, into dust. If there is no other life, one must build one up from the fragments. And meanwhile the soul longs and craves for something else. And in vain the dreamer rakes over his old dreams, as though seeking a spark among the embers, to fan them into flame, to warm his chilled heart by the rekindled fire, and to rouse up in it again all that was so sweet, that touched his heart, that set his blood boiling, drew tears from his eyes, and so luxuriously deceived him. Do you know, Nastenka, the point I have reached? Do you know that I am forced now to celebrate the anniversary of my own sensations, the anniversary of that which was once so sweet, which never existed in reality, for this anniversary is kept in memory of those same foolish, shadowy dreams, and to do this because those foolish dreams are no more, Because I have nothing to earn them with, you know even dreams do not come for nothing. Do you know that I love now to recall and visit at certain dates the places where I was once happy in my own way? I love to build up my present in harmony with the irrevocable past, and I often wander like a shadow, aimless, sad and dejected, about the streets and crooked lanes of Petersburg. What memories they are! To remember, for instance, that here just a year ago, just at this time, at this hour, on this pavement, I wandered just as lonely, just as dejected as today. And one remembers that then one's dreams were sad, and though the past was no better one feels as though it had somehow been better, and that life was more peaceful, that one was free from the black thoughts that haunt one now, that one was free from the gnawing of conscience, the gloomy, sullen gnawing which now gives me no rest by day or by night. And one asks oneself, where are one's dreams? And one shakes one's head and says, how rapidly the years fly by? And again one asks oneself, what has one done with one's years? Where have you buried your best days? Have you lived or not? Look, one says to oneself, look how cold the world is growing. Some more years will pass, and after them will come gloomy solitude, then will come old age trembling on its crutch, and after it misery and desolation. Your fantastic world will grow pale, your dreams will fade and die and will fall like the yellow leaves from the trees. Oh, Nastenka! You know it will be sad to be left alone, utterly alone, and to have not even anything to regret, nothing, absolutely nothing. For all that you have lost, all was nothing, stupid, simple nullity, there has been nothing but dreams. Come, don't work on my feelings any more, said Nastenka, wiping away a tear which was trickling down her cheek. Now it's over. Now we shall be two together. Now, whatever happens to me, we will never part.